Hi, everyone. It is so great to see you all today. I'm Manisha, the co-founder of Modulo, the organization that's hosting this event. And I'm just delighted to have Deb and Anastasia here today to talk about undoing white supremacy and how we can all do better.
Great to see everybody today. And it looks like we might have a really intimate group, which is terrific. Anastasia's going to start us off.
Oh, sure. Hi, welcome. So I wrote this book, not my idea, a book about whiteness. And it came out in 2018, but I started writing it in about 2014. 2013, maybe, well, as soon as the language of Black Lives Matter and the movement of that started to take shape. My children were students at a school called Brooklyn Free School, where the priority was on racial justice, and especially at that moment, the Black women educators who were the directors and keepers of the mission of that school, the anti-racist mission of that school, and the message of liberation at that school, started to call in all of the families who were part of that community. And there was a specific focus on looking at whiteness as a way of better understanding how we can be effective in anti-racist work and how we can be really accountable to each other in a community of where people are having very different experiences based on how we were raised, what race, how we're seen, the categorization that, that's imposed on us since race is made up, but it has real consequences. So that was my first experience of having white affinity group meetings and people of color affinity group meetings, and then coming together after those meetings to talk with each other. And that really birthed in me just a very fierce curiosity about whiteness and about how I could do better in my own social justice activism. I was already involved in social justice. I had already studied a kind of intersectionality in college, as far ago as 93, 92, 91. So I had been in it for a long time, but never through this lens of whiteness, of really, let's look at what it is to be white. And for me personally, what is my experience of being white? What are my sons experiencing now? How do they learn about being white, and how is that being processed for them? So I made this book, not my idea, out of collage. It's the fourth in my Ordinary Terrible Things series. And I focus on divorce, death, confusion about sex and sexuality. And there was a very natural progression into race. And because I am seen as white, because I'm basically white, that was my center place. And yet what the book does that's different, and that I think is what it really offers that's unique, is that it centers the problem of racism in whiteness. So instead of what I learned growing up, which is racism is a problem happening over there to those people, I was now, because of studying whiteness and because of these wonderful resources being offered to me through the Black women authors and teachers and friends and people who were saying, read this, look at this, watch this video, listen to me, talk to each other, all of that. I got to really dive in to and improve how I do my racism. So it just feels very authentic now in a different way. So instead of being a thing I pick up and say, I care about racism too, like this thing outside of myself, it really became internalized. So that's what I come to this as. And how we're gonna do this today is Deb and I, who we teamed up so that everything, there's what I bring as an artist and an activist. And Deb, when she introduces herself, will tell you about what she brings and the expertise and the ways she can understand what the children are experiencing in my books. I sent her the stories on a child, basically just going through the day. And Deb has an understanding of that I don't. And we're going to put those parts together, and hopefully it will feel supportive to you and inspiring. So I'll introduce me, Deb introduce herself. I want to acknowledge my teachers before I go any further. I could not have done this work or the work of even being present to a workshop like this without Reverend Angel Kyoto Williams. And I'm going to put these resources in the chat for all of you, just as an offering. I know that there's so many resources out there and you're all probably getting so many lists all the time. But so we're just going to offer some of the teachers who have inspired us, Deb and I. Reverend Angel Kyoto Williams, Resma Menachem, who wrote a book called My Grandmother's Hands, which is also on all the lists, about the white body supremacy and the harm of white supremacy as it's experienced in the white body, in the black body, and in the police body. Very interesting work. And the women at the Brooklyn Free School, particularly Nolika Anderson Radway, who has a podcast called Raising Rebels. Yeah, Raising Rebels, Oppressed Parents Raising Free Children. And so I will put, those are among the people, and there's a few more, Adrienne Marie Brown, who wrote Emergent Strategy. We're gonna put them in the chat. I just want to acknowledge that the information that I bring, everything that I want to offer in terms of my own inspiration and love for what racial justice is about for me is, you know, I want to offer you the same access to these teachers. And I want to offer my acknowledgement to how much they've helped me to be present. Deb, would you like to say why you're here?
Sure. You know, I see myself as a relative newcomer to activism, and it's intersected over the last few years with my work at the Bank Street College of Education and my work as a child life specialist. And so as a child life specialist and as educator, my career is focused on helping kids and families through medical experiences. But the health system is one of huge inequity, and so is our child life profession. So at Bank Street, we've been doing a lot of book reading and sharing and groups and teaching for the last few years, but I have felt that up until fairly recently, I've been leaning on my colleagues of color to be the experts. And something changed hugely during COVID and during the protests. And essentially it's the call for white people to step up and give people of color a break and take on some accountability and responsibility for change. So I'm on a huge learning curve for sure. And one of my biggest questions I always ask myself is, who am I as a white person to be teaching this stuff? But again, my Black friends tell me, well, we're tired. You know, we've been trying a long time. People are not hearing us. You need to use your power and your voice. So I'm trying to balance that need to step up and do that while still making room and pushing for the voice of color to be heard, because white people have been having the podium for a very, very long time too. My teachers, Ibram Kendi, hugely, How to Be an Anti-Racist is his book, but he's also just published a book, Anti-Racist Baby, that I can't wait to read. He's just a phenomenal activist. Robin DiAngelo, who wrote White Fragility, which may have been the most painful thing I ever read, and the thing that really pushed me to say, okay, stay in that uncomfortable place, because that's where you're going to be effective. If you kind of defend and run back into it, nothing's going to change. And also my friends and colleagues and students have been the ones who've been teaching me at such an intimate level so much, and I want to name some of them right now. Troy Pinckney, Cassandra Perry, Carlotta Downs, Joanna Boland, Regina Tipping, Alicia Scott, McDonald Doe, and Joaquin Garces. And Alicia's with us today. She probably didn't know I was going to say her name, but we had an amazing conversation a few days ago that kind of blew me out of the water. But I also want to say that some of the people on that list are people who I have strong disagreements with. And that's why they're my teachers. So I kind of wanted to start with that. And what we're going to do now is, this is going to be an interactive workshop, and that's why I'm happy that we're an intimate group. I want you all to kind of grab a piece of paper, a writing utensil, or maybe you want to type on your laptop or your phone. And I just wanted you to take a couple of moments to write down what you think white supremacy is and how you define it. And this isn't a test to try to catch you, whether you got it right or wrong. We just want to give you a chance to locate where you're at. And if you'd like to share it with us, that's fine. You can stick it in the chat box. But mostly this is for your reflection to see where you're starting today. And it's up to you. So, yeah. So we're going to start with that.
Okay.
And once you do, I'll prompt you for one more thing. When you're done, you can kind of look up or give a thumbs up or a wave or whatever. But I don't want to rush anybody.
Nice. Thank you, Lauren. Thank you, Christina. Thank you, everybody, for being here on a hot summer day.
Yeah.
I don't know if it's a hot summer day where you were. I was feeling a breeze this morning that was just like the sweetest breeze I ever felt, just because it's been so muggy. But today was clear.
Yeah. So the next quick reflection for, again, will be, would you come up with a word or 2 or 3 words that come to your mind or to your heart when you consider your own racial grouping, category, label? For example, mine would be privileged, deep shame.
Mine would be troubled, healing, fired up.
Learning. It's another one of mine.
Can we just say ours? Can we just?
Sure, you can say it too.
Mine is Black, proud.
Thank you.
Thank you, Alicia. Anybody else want to share out?
Yeah, I can share mine. I wrote learning and not sure where I fit.
Thank you, Lucy. And I see down in the chat box, ancestry, heritage, strong.
I also wrote learning and misunderstanding.
Thanks, Irene.
Thank you.
All right.
All right.
All right. So Anastasia.
Yeah, so I want to read you a story. So this is a children's book, and we are not children. And yet, I did make this book when I was well into my 40s. And there is a way in which it's speaking to the child me, but also meant to just bear witness to a child who is white, who is seen as white, who has a white mom, white family, and is coping with what they're learning about what that means. And so I'm going to share my screen with you. And so you can see it. You'll still be able to see me, but you'll be able to just really look at the pictures. And I'll walk everybody through it. I make these books, all of them. So the first was Divorce is the Worst, then Death is Stupid, Tell Me About Sex, Grandma, and Not My Idea, a book about whiteness. I make these books on grocery bag paper in collage with scraps, and it really is meant to also reflect a kind of a spiritual practice about making something whole out of broken pieces and out of garbage or what's left over. So let's look. Not My Idea, a book about whiteness.
Anastasia, were we going to take a few deep breaths before we launch into it?
Yes, we are. Look how I always, thank you for reminding me.
It's okay. Looking at my notes.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, so something about this book, it is meant to elicit a response, and it may be familiar to some of you already, but it is meant to elicit emotional responses and to kind of go to all the territories that are the touchy spots and the tender spots and the sore spots and hot spots. So before I read, I just want to ask that everybody first let's take one breath and then just be where you are, like look around the room of where you are. So one breath in, all of us together. Let out that breath and just see where you are, the room that you're in, where you sit, what the temperature in the room is, where the light is coming from, what the sounds are. Let's take another breath and check in with your body. How's your body feel right now? Are there any parts that feel especially good or ache, or maybe you're hungry or thirsty, or maybe you're not because you just had lunch? But try to just like notice that you have a body and that you're in it. Feel your own hands. And then the last breath, let's be here together. And let that breath out and notice who you're with and that you're not alone. None of us. As I read this story, pay attention to the sensations you may feel in your body, emotions that may come up. If there is a page or a line that I say or a bit of dialogue that makes your heart beat a little faster, try to notice that. And maybe if you are taking notes, or if you want to put it in the chat, you know, the page where this happens, I felt a little like my heart started to beat a little faster. Or notice your body language. So if something's happening in the book on the screen and you notice you're pulling back, right? Just try to notice those things. All of that is just really good information. Again, just like with the question about what's white supremacy, what are some words you associate with your own racial designation? It's not a test, but it's all useful information when we're learning and when we're in a space of wanting to understand and wanting to be transformed and healed from corrupt systems. So just notice what's happening in your body and in your mind, where you pull back, where you lean in, where you feel joy and possibility that may not have been there before, and all those body sensations, including dissociation, including numbness, including nothing, right? All good information. I'll start with the dedication real quickly, just to tell you that Toni Morrison told me to write this book. In 1993, Toni Morrison did an interview with Charlie Rose, and she said to him, "White people have a very, very serious problem, and they should start thinking about what they can do about it." She added, "Take me out of it." Those words landed in me as a direct command. It really was the first time that I ever felt, even with all my years in social justice writing and activism and nonprofits, it's the first time I felt like somebody handed me like just a job. Here's your job. Heal this, notice this. And I made this book for my own white sons with help from their teachers and mine. It's dedicated to the Brooklyn Free School, where my family was first called upon to engage with whiteness in order to dismantle white supremacy. Deepest thanks to Reverend Angel Kyoto Williams, Loretta Ross, Anyanwu Uwa, Nolika Anderson Radway, and Randy Clancy and Ben Howard. So when grown-ups try to hide scary things from kids, we see mom peering through her fingers, kind of not wanting to see what she sees. "Oh no, not again," she says. And the child who's supposed to be doing their homework turns all the way around in their chair to see what's going on right behind their back. "What? Mom, what not again?" asks the child. When grown-ups try to hide scary things from kids, it's usually because they're scared too. "Who is that with their hands up?" asks the child. "Why is that policeman screaming at him?" When I read this to children, I always tell them I'm going to make a loud sound now. Bang, 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 bang. Mom shuts off the power on the remote. They want to bury the truth. And we see how the child is reacting to that sound. "You don't need to worry about this," reassures mom. "You're safe. Understand?" And the child thinks but doesn't say, "No." "Our family is kind to everyone," says mom. "We don't see color." But the child who's turned from their homework to do the real work of understanding what they just saw is clearly choosing colors. Deep down, we all know color matters. Skin color makes a difference in how the world sees you and in how you see the world. And now mom and the child have headed into town and they're running errands. They're just going through their day and mom stops into a shop. She says, "I want to bring my aunt a gift. This will only take a minute." And the child follows close behind with their hoodie all the way up. Skin color makes a difference in how much trouble seems to find you or let you be. And we see two children dressed pretty much the same. They even have the exact same sneakers on. The security guard, and they're doing the same activity, right? They're both looking at the bowls. They're looking at the stuff on the shelves that's interesting and beautiful. And the security guard's eyes follow the child with the brown skin, and they let be the child with the light skin. In stores, in cars, on sidewalks, at school, your skin color affects the most ordinary daily experiences. So we see a child in the backseat of their parents' car, playing on their device, not even aware of or noticing or troubled by the sirens outside on the road, because their car has not been stopped before. Those sirens are not for them. Your skin color affects which neighborhoods welcome you. And we see that they roll up into a neighborhood that looks like this, with a white St. Joseph holding a white baby Jesus out on the lawn and an American flag on the porch. This is the kind of house that my aunts and uncles lived in. And now inside the house, the aunt says, "So relieved you got here safely," and embraces the child. And the mom asks from off screen, "Why wouldn't we?" And the aunt says, "The protests." And then we hear from the television, which is always on at this house. Marchers came to demand justice for the unarmed African American. They demand an end to killings across the nation, part of a shameful pattern that has claimed the lives, particularly of young men of color. Marchers reference past victims and a video taken by a bystander. And the uncle, hearing this report, complains, "They're blocking the road." Breaking news from the television set. Family speaks out on police shooting. This is an image from a press conference in Baton Rouge after the murder of Alton Sterling. That's the family members that were there. You may get the message that racism is happening only to Black and brown people. But look at the family here on this other page. Look how the aunt closes her eyes and turns away. I can't watch the news, she says. And that tells me there's pain in there. She's turning away from. And we see the mom turned halfway away, making excuses. That officer was just doing his job. And then we see the child who's tuned into the child who's in pain on the television set. And each of them holding in or trying to hold in feelings that are really too big for their little bodies. Racism is a white person's problem, and we are all caught up in it. Mostly by refusing to look at it. And the aunt tries to get the child's attention away. Come away from the TV now, she says. Look, I made your favorite. And yes, there are those fudgy brownies there with 1.5 inches of frosting on top of them, but the child is still tuned into what they're seeing. And I'm hearing from the TV screen in the other room, racial justice, we must step up. You can face this. Understanding the truth takes courage, especially a painful truth about your own people, your own family. And now leaving the aunt and uncle's house back in the car, mom notices something's up. Are you all right? She asks. And now driving through a neighborhood where Black and brown people walk and work and shop and go to church and get their groceries and just enjoy themselves. Mom locks the door and puts her hand on her wallet. Even people you love may behave in ways that show they think they are the good ones. The child notices that. Racism was not your idea. You don't need to defend it. You can bring your curiosity to learn about it and see that it's true. And now we've arrived at the public library, just stopping off at the library for a few minutes, and mom says, I'll be over here if you need me, okay? And the child is free to wander, and what the child finds when they wander down those stairs and kneeling on that rug is a book called Our Shared History, and they read these words. In the United States of America, white people have committed outrageous crimes against Black people for 400 years. All along, every step of the way, people who love justice and love each other have been fighting back. So 2 legacies, right? They're learning about 2 legacies, a legacy of harm and a legacy of love. Many white people did things they never should have done. Denied financial opportunity in the form of bank loans, denied housing, form of eviction, and everything we know and don't understand about redlining, and denied voting rights in the form of a voter registration test that was never meant to be passed. It was meant to be failed. Parts A, B, and C, pages 1 through 4, sections 1 through 20, so convoluted. Exploited the love and labor of Black women. Here's the work of the home. Somebody has to do it, right? Many white people fail to see the problem with this. But these are all choices that put wealth and power into white hands, homes, and neighborhoods. Some white people joined the leaders of Black liberation. This is a legacy that I didn't learn about until I was much older. Angelina Grimke and Sarah Grimke in 1838 were abolitionists. When I read this to children, I define those terms. Abolitionists, which meant they fought to end slavery. Suffragists, which meant they were fighting for the vote. And sisters, which meant they stuck together. White people joined Julian Bond and the members of the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee in 1963. White people listened to and learned from the music of Black artists such as Nina Simone, who in 1967 sang about liberation, which means love plus freedom. White nuns were there with fellow marchers on the Selma to Montgomery March in 1965. White people have learned from and have been inspired by leaders like John Lewis. Rest in peace. who knelt with fellow demonstrators, including very young children, in 1962. So often I hear the kids are too young, you can't tell them about this, that they're too young, but look, this child is, of course, too young to hear about and have to contend with extreme disparity and outright violence. But look, there's a role there to play, which is a conscious, humble joining in with the movement for justice, the movement for love. And where John Lewis knelt in 1962, Colin Kaepernick kneels in 2017. And I'll show you here this, I made this to go on tour with me when I took the book on tour in 2018, and when I go to schools and libraries. He's made out of cardboard and I painted him. And
you need to unshare your screen for a second so they can see it?
Yeah.
Great.
Stop the share for a second?
For 1 second so they can see.
Yeah.
Make sure everybody can see him.
Okay, thank you, Deb.
You're
So he's, when he folds in the middle so that I could carry him as a carry-on, so that he would only be 22 inches, he folds. And then I put him up, and it's an opportunity for me really to align. Each time I read this story, I align to Black liberation. And Lucy mentioned, where do I fit, right? And I created a place for myself right next to him. What he kneels for, I kneel for. That's not saying that I've had the same experiences as him, but I do have an experience of love and connection and liberation and a desire to be liberated myself from an oppressive system. So, Colin Kaepernick and all who kneel now that he is not kneeling, it continues. Racism is still happening. It keeps changing and keeps being the same. And we see a child who looks very heavily weighed upon. And I imagine, or I'm guessing that some of you have felt this way. Trying to take all that information in when it's new. And why is it so new? But we see the heaviness of the child, and I just want to say, being here, just being here, alive in this moment, you have a chance to care about this, to connect. And the child looks up at children just in the library, enjoying themselves too. Taking up space, being where they belong. And the child's noticing in a different way, in a new way. Connecting means opening. And opening sometimes feels like breaking. And we see that the child's heart is breaking. And mom says, our car's parked over here, love, as they leave the library. And now back in the car, the child says from the back seat, Mom, I don't feel good. She says, uh-oh, should I pull over? And the child erupts. I need to know what's going on. What are you talking about? Asked Mom. Why didn't anyone teach me real history? I do see color. I see yours, mine, and everybody's. You can't hide what's right in front of me. I know that what that police officer did was wrong. The child yells, and the mom pulls over. Okay, geez. Now mom's overwhelmed. You don't have to yell. Go with your instincts on this one. Racial justice is possible, but only if we're honest with each other and ourselves. And that means sometimes we get into an argument that we don't understand with somebody we dearly love. And mom, who's still not ready to talk, but I trust that she will be eventually, says, I see a playground over there. Want to get some air? And the child takes off that seatbelt, leaps out of the safety of that vehicle, and runs across the playground. Yes. Past the children who are already playing together. Your history's not all written yet. What do you want it to say? In each of my books, I have a section at the end where you can have either some activities or just a few more words from the child themselves, kind of with what they've learned, with what they've internalized. The child is asking the reader, want to know whose liberation you're fighting for? Your own. White supremacy has been lying to all of us kids for centuries. White supremacy is pretend. So the idea of whites being superior is pretend, but the consequences are real. The truth is much simpler, right? We often hear about this as a difficult conversation, as these so hard conversations. The truth is much simpler. Dangerous, the hand on the gun. Not dangerous, the hands in the air. Whiteness is a bad deal. It always was. Here's the contract. Here's what binds us to whiteness. We get stolen land, stolen riches, special favors. Land, riches, and favors may be revoked at any time for any reason. You can see the small print at the bottom. Whiteness gets to mess endlessly with the lives of your friends, neighbors, loved ones, and all fellow humans of color for the purpose of profit of all things. Also your soul, sign below. But a child who has this information, who understands that there's a system at work, there's forces at work, can say, dude, we see your pointy tail. They don't have to make a deal with the devil. You can be white without signing on to whiteness. I learned about Juliette Hampton Morgan while researching this book. She was a white librarian who fought for racial justice in Montgomery, Alabama. When Juliette was riding the bus and the white driver would refuse to pick up a black bus rider, even after he collected their fare, this would happen a lot, Juliette would pull the emergency cord and raise HE double hockey sticks until the driver did his job. This was an act of love for herself and for the community to which she belonged. What she did is called disrupting white supremacy. And she didn't read books by Robin DiAngelo, and she didn't read books by Ibram Kendi, and yet she had that feeling on the bus of like, this cannot stand. I cannot stand it. Just by tuning into that instinct. And that's very important for us to know. It's not as complicated as it seems when you're in touch with the impact of white supremacy in your own body, not while I'm riding this bus. Grow justice inside yourself like a bean sprout in a milk carton. This is something that almost every first grader has done. What if it dies? Plant it again. Never stop planting justice. A strong internal sense of justice will not fail you, even when a lack of justice in the world does. Innocence is overrated. A lot of people tell me when I offer the book, but I want to protect my children's innocence. Innocence is overrated. Knowledge is power. Get some. Grow wise. Make history. That's that.
Thank you, Anastasia, for a beautiful reading. I wonder if we could just take one moment here for people to put in the chat room what you're feeling in your heart at this moment, just a word or two. Words, phrases, before I begin to give some framework. Connected, sad, floored in a good way. Sad, reflecting, hopeful, aware. Responsibility, educated, energized. Yeah, it gets you kind of lit, doesn't it? Especially the ending. Well, this book, as Anastasia intentionally wrote it, it brings up a lot of feelings. And big ones and little ones, and questions and concerns. And what it does is it makes me think about how as adults, we've already learned and practiced for a long time coping tools. We might, as coping tools, I'm thinking about meditation, exercise, journaling, community, therapy, spirituality, all those things we've been leaning on during the pandemic. But, young kids don't have these tools yet. And yet their emotions are as big as a grown-up's, which is what really calls us to give kids tools to cope. And how do we do that when we're reeling from our own onslaught of emotions, right? We got to put the oxygen mask on ourselves before we can help our kids. And I think Anastasia, you were going to share a spread. Just
yeah.
thought this really showed that parallel process of the mother suffering and the kid suffering. That picture where the mom has her finger on the remote and is pressing power and saying, "You don't have to worry about this. You're safe." And the kid's thinking, "No," but says nothing. And so for the rest of the story, we're watching that child reckon with the disconnect between what they know and what they don't know. That the police officer committed murder, and the message coming from the family, which is, this has nothing to do with you, and it's not resonating. So when we consider speaking with our kids about racism, we've got to remember that their brains don't quite work like ours yet. For those of you, I know there are a couple of you on there who are child life specialists and teachers, and you know that they see things very concretely and in binaries. So they see things in black and white. And kids as young as like 3 to 6 or 7, it's hard for them to think that somebody can be good and bad at the same time. And they focus on one aspect of a person or feeling or thing at a time. And they have a hard time understanding that they can be angry and love you at the same time. And the whole thing about racism is that if we think that only bad people are racists and good people are not racist, we miss all of just the huge part of the systemic racism and what's in our DNA and what's in our consciousness because of the fact that we're born into it. And Anastasia's going to say something about her son in a conversation with him.
I always learned so much from when you talk about this, Deb, because it reminds me of when I told my son, who was 6 at the time, I tried to explain white supremacy. I blundered my way through it the way that people do, but it was important to me to try. So I, as I was explaining this disparity and the setup, these forces at work, my son was walking around me the way he walks around a subway pole, when there's enough room to go around. There's only a few people on the subway, and he just like holds onto the pole and goes around. So he's kind of like orbiting me as I'm talking to him. And he just paused mid-orbit and looked up at me. And he said, "So we're the bad color, but we're not bad people, right?" And I thought, oh, I've blown it. I already messed it up. But what I said, the words that came to me that felt so true were, well, that depends on what we do with what we know. And now suddenly he had, first of all, a role that he could play, something he could do, and he was with, the we of that is very important. It depends on what we do with what we know. Now we're together in this, and we get to make choices.
Yeah, and I'm thinking another variable to think about when we're thinking about kids is their identity development. That has a lot to do with how they're able to understand these concepts. And the first crucial step of forming an identity comes when the infant understands that they exist separately from the mother. And so the very concept of I and other becomes a vital cornerstone of their identity. And that makes you want to see yourself as separate from other people, and it makes you categorize people. And kids thinking in a really centric way, kind of centering on one aspect of something at a time, a person is in their mind either good or bad, black or white, literally. And in teaching them about racism, we're trying to get them to think abstractly when they might not be able to do it yet. And this centric thinking starts to lessen in school-age children, which is why it's a little bit easier to begin to explain things. But kids are still very concrete thinkers, even in school age. And they're not as ready to think in nuanced and abstract ways until their brains develop more in adolescence. But here's the key. We don't want to wait, because the longer we wait, the more we have to undo. And unless we disrupt those binary images and replace them with the truth, the bias and the racism becomes deeply embedded in their thinking at a really early age, following us and undergirding our thinking into adulthood. It's hard to undo these belief systems in teenagers. Ibram Kendi, the author of Anti-Racist Baby, he tells us why we must teach Black and brown children about racism. Because if we don't teach them about the context of history and history of racism, when they're mistreated for having brown skin, the only logical conclusion that they can come to as binary thinkers is that there's something wrong with them. They internalize, it's me. There's something wrong with me, that they're bad, that being brown is bad.
And when we fail to teach white kids what is happening and what the system is set up to do and to fail to do, when white kids growing up not knowing why they are protected from those things, why am I safe and this person is not, or just oblivious to any other reality besides the one that they're having, they may come to think that they deserve it, all the comforts and all the safety, or that they earned it, right? This is the meritocracy idea, which is, it's false. So a white child who thinks that they deserve all this, or that they earned it, they may also grow up thinking that it's owed to them. Comfort, wealth, endless second chances. And we see this constantly, traumatically played out again and again in more lenient sentences or no sentences, no indictment, no charges against the person who did this thing and that thing, and just again and again, just like one child is protected and another is imperiled. And even without class privilege, white kids can expect the occasional free pass for the benefit of the doubt, which may be enough to keep them in school, not expelled, out of prison, not arrested, not you look like somebody who fits a description, and alive. Somebody looks at them and doesn't, a police officer looks at them and doesn't feel threatened. The phenomenon of that keeps white people alive. And this distorted view also speaks to something I've encountered as I've gone around teaching and talking about this book and learning about this book by sharing it, is that there's this idea that white children are fine until they learn about racism, and then they hate themselves. And it's so sad. And there was a headline once when I was out on tour and somebody took a picture of me kneeling by Colin Kaepernick, and the headline read that there was a teacher going around, an author going around telling white kids to hate themselves. And, it's true that if you're raised to see your whiteness as your goodness, then my book will disrupt that by telling kids you can sign off from that. That's a whole new concept, but what it says is you are not that. Your nature is not that racial designation, and yet there's a responsibility involved with having this white body, right? Even though it's not white like paper. So my experience was of not being able to have a healthy racial identity until I fully internalized what Toni Morrison was saying in that interview, and what the women who were in charge of my children's school were saying, which is, you can make choices that disrupt this whole thing, and not be defined by the whiteness. And So, this idea that you could choose to sign off from mass murder, genocide, mass incarceration, land theft, property theft, police atrocity, and the dehumanizing, relentless anti-Black aggression committed by my people at the macro and micro level. The fact that I have a choice to divest from that and correct and clear those distortions and see people, really see people, and including see myself and see my people and see the denials and see the warping of truth, hold up the truth next to the warp, and this kind of fades away and the truth really shines. You don't have to be a special, really special or brilliant person to want no part of that. And whiteness is all of those things. So when we tell kids about the systemic racism that wants to kind of bully them and seduce them into this non-consensual complicity with whiteness, then they can make a choice, right? They can dive into the intersectionality. They can make space inside themselves for all the lived realities, including their own. And, everyone can be liberated. That's the goal.
Thanks, Anastasia. So a lot of workshops culminate with a Q&A, and we have time for that, where you ask us about the topic. But before we get there, we want to ask a few more questions of us to you. And I want to say why. Questions that we often get in our audiences, questions regarding whiteness, they tend to be variations on the theme of, but what do I do now? And that can actually stall growth and undermine your confidence. And we're here to spark beautiful bonfires of curiosity and fan the flames of transformation that are already lit up in you. And the other thought is that unless your questions are specifically about me or Anastasia, we don't have all the answers to most of these questions. And so we want to hold up that place of not knowing, that there are not easy scripts or answers for these things. But we're gonna guide you into a place where you can ask your questions with these two questions. And like before, you can jot down notes on your paper, you can share them verbally or in the chat box. So here's the deal. What, if anything, gets in the way or inhibits you openly talking about racism with young kids? And this could be family members, this could be kids you teach, kids you work with in hospitals. Say the thing. Say what stops you or undermines you or makes you feel inadequate to the task. Say what interferes or weighs on you or trips you up.
And I'm going to add to this question, just in case this is your experience. If you do make a point to talk with children about race, and you don't relate to this question, what is it that guides you and fires you in that ability to flow that way? So the question depends on where you relate to this. What gets in the way or inhibits or interferes or weighs on you or trips you up, or what gives you the motivation to go ahead and do it if you're having a different experience, if you don't feel inhibited. And we'd love to see them in the chat, or just we'll ask you to share. It would be wonderful if people want to share.
Let's see, one new message. I gotta go down. I want to witness how painful it was to hear that book. And that pain is real. It's not just emotional pain. You feel it in your body. I felt myself wanting to cry a couple of times. Manisha says, from a teacher's perspective, sometimes families want to shelter their children from politics. And I'm not sure if it's my role to be the one to bring up disturbing political events with them. So that gets in her way, feeling it's not her job. And maybe, Manisha, maybe you worry that if you do bring it up, somebody's going to get angry at you for having done that, that you tread somewhere where it wasn't your business to tread. Brooke says, I'm afraid that I don't have enough expertise and will say the wrong thing. I can guarantee you'll say the wrong thing. I say the wrong thing all the time, but I still keep getting better at it. And you don't get better at it unless you try. This is the hard part. And this is where grace is an extraordinary part of taking these risks. Grace and mercy for yourself and the other people involved in conversation with you, the kids and families. Question, okay.
Question. I was asked to type the question or repeat it, but there were some answers above.
I'm looking.
The systemic racism structures get in the way to change curriculum focus. Right, the racism itself is in the way, the structure itself is an obstacle in terms of curriculum, yeah. As a school librarian, I'm motivated by stories and messaging. I want my mostly white learning community to feel empowered and with the vocabulary to ask questions safely and move forward with conviction. School librarians, you know, I loved putting a librarian in the book. The radical front line of librarians, man. Whew. But those words are important. You know, you want your community to feel empowered. And I'm not sure if it's possible to ask questions safely in terms of, I'm not sure, you know, one of my greatest teachers is Reverend Angel Kyoto Williams, who I mentioned, and she often reminds me that it's not safe. It's okay. That's not the goal. It's never gotten us anywhere. To be polite or to try to pretend that there's safety when there isn't. But that feel empowered and have a vocabulary and move with conviction, all of that is so valuable. I'm afraid that I don't have enough expertise and will say the wrong thing. That's, Deb mentioned that one. Thank you. I'm afraid of the influence I have over children as an adult. Right, and I have a lot more to learn, so I want to be sure I'm doing it skillfully. There's a lot of this, like, once I figure it out, I'll bring it to you. And
I've been figuring it out for several years now.
You can stay there for a long time. Yeah, there's no such thing, but, and I make the book, this is just one way. I'm just one person, and this was my way, and that's how I learn. And so that's how I teach too. So the book can be, the book can be shared in just a spread at a time. If there's any spread or 2 spreads or 3 that you feel like you can wander through with your child and answer some questions, even just about the body language, about the eye contact that's being made or not made, about the way people are holding each other or not holding each other in this scene. What do you think's going on for the kid here? You don't have to know everything. You know, you can just know yourself. Not that that's easy, but it is possible to know oneself and for your child to know themselves. So you're not trying to solve racism when you read this book to your child, and you're not trying to make it seem nicer than it is, but be in community where these questions can be asked, where this child can be borne witness to. And all of the children in this book can be witnessed, and all the adults too. The adults are not horrible people. They're not equipped to answer the child's questions, but the child is equipped to get their self to the library and open up a book. All right, I gotta, find sanctuary in a library. That's not the first time a child has done that when the adults around them are struggling. Here's another voice. Go ahead, Deb. Do you want to read? Do you want to say?
Sure, I see as an African American teacher who works with white kids, I want to have a conversation with them, but I wonder if I should check with the parents first. On the other hand, I talk openly with African American children. So I, I think that goes to, I mean, a couple of you have said in different ways that you feel you should ask parental permission first. And, you know, this is a hairy place, isn't it? And child life specialists deal with this all the time because parents often don't want to tell their kids what's going to happen medically. They think that's going to frighten them. And, but research has shown that when kids are prepared and know what's going to happen, that they cope better and that it's less scary and that they heal better. And so I'm wondering about this regard. And yet we do want to respect all parents as experts on their child. But sometimes we have to do a little bit of educating and coaching and helping parents understand. And the thing is that there's that thing of responding to kids when they bring it up and being the one to bring it up. So having literature in your classroom brings it up. And so that's a piece of it. That's a piece of it. I don't have the easy answers for this one, and I see why it's a barrier. And I think that being worried that somebody will come out with these huge statements like the one Anastasia said, the headline of, you know, teacher wants my kid to hate themselves. And I remember Bank Street College did, the School for Children has been doing black and white affinity groups with their kids in the School for Children for years. And it was written up in the Post as my white kid came home crying and hates themselves, and Bank Street shouldn't be doing this. And it caused a huge furor. But I think that Anastasia is saying it's not about hating yourself. It's about liberating yourself.
Can I say one thing about the teacher who works with white children? So something that happened at the school where my children went is sometimes if the teacher who is black wants to talk about something with the students and they need to know that the white parents are going to be, you know, just like, I need somebody to stand next to me. I need you to make the call, actually. So there was several occasions where this white parent, anybody who was willing or even was afraid, but like whatever, we were tapped like, hey, I need you to get the community ready for this. We're going to talk about this with the white kids. If there is even one white person who's willing to, you know, really may even be thrilled to like, okay, let me do this. I'll do my part. Let me get this group ready. So we really do need to have the back of an African-American teacher so that the white person takes the risk in that moment of making the other white parents upset.
And I think we're to our last guided question. I think we're there. Although I don't want to miss responding to anybody.
Limited by my own knowledge.
Yeah.
And I even find children of color and their families not knowing much about. And that can be said out loud. I feel limited by my own knowledge, and so let's begin with this. And then let's go on to this, depending on, like Deb said about bonfires of curiosity. You know, if we can go at it this way, then we're not claiming that there's a right way. We're not claiming that we're going to figure it all out and fix it, but we are going to connect on it and in it.
It's the inquiry stance. It's saying, what do we need to know more about? And sitting in the not knowing and not letting the not knowing deactivate you.
And I also think, if I can add to it, just the fact that we don't know, that kind of tells us that we do not talk about these people. We do not talk about these heroes. So that kind of comes with the white supremacy, because we just show only these people to be our, models. And I think we need more models of, other cultures and colors. And
Hugely.
so,
Yep.
yeah.
More lenses to look at the world through. And
and show kids. They should be
sorry?
growing up, hoping that they'll be one day like, somebody who they heard about in school and stuff.
Yeah.
So.
And trying to help kids who are in homogenous places have exposure to kids who are different than them.
And even without that, if you, something that we took out of the book, and I'm not sure why we took it out, but it was on the poster inviting you all to come to this talk. The people you most need to talk to about race are your own family members. The person whose experience you most need to understand is your own. It really can, again and again, even though it seems like a paradox, or it seems like a contradiction, that we're decentering ourselves as white people. Like the white people have been the center and the norm and the standard for so long in the distorted mind of whiteness, in the culture of whiteness. And we want to decenter that, but at the same time, the focus does need to go back to what is the experience that I had as a child with seen as white? What is the experience my child is having seen as white? What experience are they, what trouble is not finding them? And to continually bring it back to that place and be processing, so a child can, in a very personal way, be processing how they feel about the disparity that they're learning about, but also who they are, and fortifying that and fortifying those connections, not through political affiliation or the affinity of we don't share skin color, but through just love of justice and love of one another, and not to be used as an excuse, right? Sometimes people will say to me that I'm so racist for making this book because of it makes white people feel bad thing. That's so racist. To talk about race at all is racist, right? And it's white people giving me this critique because there's only one human race. So I'm not saying that. That's a dodge.
But if I can add to it, what I love about your book is that you do show the white people fighting there. You show the heroes that we can be, that the kids can look up to, that were fighting for, the Black people, even though they were white. And I think that's what's beautiful about your book, that you added it, you put it there.
Well, and I want to keep it rooted in the fact that the reason to do it is not for anyone else, but for your own refusal to be complicit.
Yeah.
For me, it's my own, and I want my children to find it intolerable to, if I'm born into the role of oppressor, if I just ignore it and be like, yeah, but I'm not like that, I don't believe in racism, then I just grow up and I fulfill my destiny because I passively accepted all this benefit and favor and privilege. And but I think that it's intolerable, but only if they know what the system is, that we don't downplay it as unfairness, but we say, there are evil forces at work, and they channel resources this way and hoard resources this way, and they punish this way. And then the children can say, literally, that is not a good idea. I don't want to participate in that. And then it's about autonomy and an authentic connection to justice and love instead of Republican and Democrat. Like those binaries don't serve us at any level. In this.
Sorry.
No, that's okay. I'm talking to you.
No, you finish your thought.
I have one thing. Somebody asked for the resources to be listed, and I thought I would be able to just drop them into the chat. and it looks like it's not letting me paste them there. So I am going to figure out a way to do it. And even if it means sharing my screen and letting you like screenshot it or something like that.
Maybe Manisha could help with that too, but that's a great idea.
Okay.
You know, I'm thinking about that back to the child development piece of how concrete kids are. And when I mentioned homogenous groups, there's a wonderful documentary, and it's not about black and white, but it is about a school in the heartland, which was a very white homogenous area that wanted to learn about the Holocaust. And there were no Jewish people there. And they started a project called the Paperclip Project to help kids wrap their heads around what the number 6 million was, that 6 million Jews were murdered. And they began to gather paper clips. And this documentary is extraordinary about where it went. They ended up meeting people and hearing from people who were Holocaust survivors. They ended up getting a boxcar and filling it with the like the train that Jews were taken on to the concentration camps, and filling it with paper clips. And again, it's just, we need to concretize this stuff. And there's so many activities that we can do with children. And something as simple as an art project where you give them a couple of different colors of white and red and blue and yellow paint, and have everybody in the room figure out their skin color and try to match it with the paint. And that begets these conversations, right? It makes it something that we can talk about. I think I want to lead us to the last place, which it feels more of a hopeful place. We asked what obstacles, but I love this sentence, and I want you to take like a deep breath and finish this sentence. Take your time. I would talk to children or my family about our responsibility to undo racism and white supremacy if I could trust that, and fill in the blank. What do you need to trust? What would need to be in place for you to be that brave and take that risk? And I'm just thinking about spending time with a friend of mine and how hard it was to talk about this stuff, and feeling that I wasn't willing to risk the friendship for it. And what that meant, where that put me in my soul of having to make a conversation, having to make a decision about whether to push a conversation that the other person didn't want to have. And I think I would need to feel safe in those situations, that I wouldn't lose those relationships. And I'm not sure that that's guaranteed. Right? That's, whew, saying that out loud is scary for me. Anyway, so I thought I might model for you.
While you're thinking about this, hopefully while I'm talking, I'm not making it harder for you to think of your answer. So I'll say the question again. I would talk to children and my family members about our responsibility to undo racism and white supremacy, if I could trust that. So the assurance is not there. Like I said before, it's not exactly safe. Reverend Angel consulted on this book, and it was at one of, it was almost ready, or I thought it was almost done. And she went through it, and she was liking this and suggested various things, like make sure I can see the brown child in the store being watched by security. And I said, no, I don't want a child who's brown or black to see themselves targeted in my book. She said, no, I need to see it. She's black. I need to see it. People don't believe us. Put it right there on the page, so that for me. And when she saw the book, she, held that little boy to her, that little child to herself, and said, That's me. That's me in that store being watched by security. And at the end, she's looking through my pages that when they were in the originals, and she said, you haven't prepared this white child for the rejection that they're going to face when they start bringing up, refusing to comply with white supremacy in their family. And she said, so, and that's where the ending, you know, your history is not all written yet. What do you want it to say? That she is responsible for me realizing that ending, that the child couldn't stop in the playground and play with the children who were already playing there. The child had to pass by that delightful, beautiful little scene and reckon with themselves first. And that reckoning, to some degree, is alone. And there is rejection involved, but look who's here in this little Zoom call. And look who's all reading the books about this right now. They're, the child opens that book, Our Shared History, and sees the legacy of harm, 400 years of outrageous crimes, and the legacy of people who loved each other and loved justice, have been fighting back all along. There is a community to step into. It wasn't always there, but it's my self-appointed responsibility is to create that community and that belonging. There's belonging here. So that as an antidote to the alienation, that when we are conditioned into whiteness, and when we are conditioned, if we are white children, to not question it and look the other way and just enjoy the spoils, that is what's alienating. Turning and risking and then grieving the rejections and the loss brings us into community with something way bigger and just as old. Mm-hmm. And anything that has that much power to harm also has that much power to transform and uplift and unite us. So, or let us at least be, feeding into the same kind of currents of healing from white supremacy. So, did people say things and we can interact with them here?
They did. Some of the.
Oh, I see. The website, Teaching for Change.
Or am I missing it? I'm going to start from the bottom. If it wouldn't give them a platform to further spread their harmful views. Sometimes it's like, oh my gosh, what am I opening myself and the world up to, and opening a conversation with somebody who I know already has harmful views.
Interesting.
If I could love myself enough that I can be aligned with my truth always, and not feel that if others judge me, it will shatter me. Mm-hmm. Feel safe enough that I know that I can listen to all points of view with compassion and take them in without reacting from a place of anger and judgment.
That's hard to do.
Oh, boy, is it, because that's what, with my friend who I was kind of having a conversation and not having a conversation with, I felt myself cross over that line of wanting her to understand and get it more than I was seeking to understand. And I was becoming a zealot. And I felt myself slamming against this and pushing her away. Yeah, that's a big one. If I could trust that the systems that I work within would stand behind me. So instead, I tackle the systems to create a better system that recognizes every person as human. In my trusted circles, I can talk to children and adults candidly and model practices to change daily interactions. We must deal with the systems. And the systems, sometimes we just want to walk away from them because they're so dysfunctional. And what does it mean to be dealing within those systems and trying to change them. It's
I feel like it's again and again, you're finding out what you can stand. And, but the alignment, I find, like, you know, I mentioned that I made this cardboard Colin Kaepernick so that I can find my place next to him, take my knee humbly next to him, and for my own reasons. And something that we either you like be, if you, this is your system that you can control, this is the only one. So we can move in and out of systems and be like, hey, at this workplace, let's do this differently. What do you guys think of this? Or, you know, I have an idea, and you bring your idea, and then your place becomes where you're doing your disruption, and that's amazing, and that's wonderful. But again and again, it's always going to have to come back to where's white supremacy live in me? Where do I embody it? Where do I enact it? And not as a self-shaming thing, but there are things to grieve, certainly, about what we've done and not done, and not understood, or didn't realize we didn't know. There is actual real grief, and that's very private usually, and you know, it's not for performing out. It doesn't have to be shared, but you can, you know, go to a friend like you would for any kind of grief, and it moves through. But the better system, that's all. All I wanted to say was the better system can be in your own hands. So Resmaa Menakem, who I mentioned, Menakem, is that work and the workshops that he offers. He is a Black man. He has cops in his family, various parts of his family, but he is unequivocal, uncompromising, unwaveringly, deeply aligned with Black liberation and with all bodies' liberation from the generational harm that comes down through us in this system, which is so embedded. And so healing, the more we heal, the more space opens up in us to be able to do these things that you're saying would allow you to do these things.
All right, this is Kelly. I put the comment on systems. I'm an African-American woman who is living this daily. I agree, it does start with us. You do have to have white allies to move the systematic oppression. I agree with all of that, but it will not change fully, and we won't be liberated until those systems are eradicated. Yeah. So that is not a soft work, it's not an easy work, but it has to be done. But we have to start with conversations like this and material, which I appreciate you bringing, and that is where it begins. But if we move from the table and our voice leaves the table, then we start all over again. So we can't. So we come to solace like this, to regroup, to take care of ourselves, to be empowered, but we have to return to the table. And I've been very active in my agency. And because of that, lots of risk taking, because I can take some risks, but there's so many who can't. And so I also don't want teachers going into a room with systems that are oppressive, that they're bringing more harm to themselves than they are help. So we have to have people like you and the schools to help us to navigate that. So thank you for the work that you're doing.
No, and thank you for it doesn't dismantle itself. We have to actually undo the bolts. And that's every day there's opportunities. And we want to find them and do them. Take it apart, reveal it, expose it. Thank you, Kelly, for what you said.
Thank you, Kelly.
For what you're already doing.
I saw Brooke's hand.
Yeah, just as Kelly was speaking, you know, I was thinking about, I was one of, I didn't post it originally about the worry about parents. how parents would respond if I bring, a conversation about race to the children that I work with. I'm a child therapist, but that was a concern of mine too. And I'm just thinking about the word troublemaker and how, I think it would be great if we as white people who are needed as allies because we have the privilege of taking greater risks, or not greater, but of taking risks without the same consequences. I wish that I was more comfortable with being a troublemaker. And I'm just thinking about the librarian in the book, in Anastasia's book. She must have really been looked at as a troublemaker when she stood on that bus.
She lost everything.
Yeah.
She didn't have a community. It didn't go well for her, but she did what she did for as long as she could.
Wasn't it John Lewis who said we should all be wonderful troublemakers?
Yes, good trouble.
Good trouble.
Good trouble.
But I love that you mentioned her, because she didn't know the risk she was taking when she took it. I mean, she didn't know what the consequences would be. She was fired immediately. So she wrote a letter. You can learn, there's a library in Montgomery named for her. And, but wouldn't it have been wonderful if we learned about her in 4th grade?
Yes.
And then you can see yourself right in there, right in that story. But yeah, she cross was burned on her lawn, her life was threatened, or she lost her job. I think they threatened to institutionalize her, or maybe they did. Everything. But that's how, that's why I use the word evil. I mean, that's how wicked it is in its self-preservation if somebody betrays their race. And so, but the risk is not that the risk is for taking. We can take the risk together. We can support each other. I'm on your, whatever you want to do, I want to support you to do it, And if somebody hurts you, I want you to come to me and cry to me. And then, replenish. And so you have the nerve to do it again a different way, maybe with 2 people instead of just by yourself next time. But we can move. We can keep moving. Don't be frozen. Don't be hopeless. Move. And love each other and move, and love each other and move.
I'm seeing Nicole's comment of having labels with negative connotations for standing up for the rights of others is problematic to begin with. I don't want to put you on the spot, Nicole, but that made me want to know more. Do you want to say anything more? And it's okay if you don't. Maybe not. It's okay. Other questions and thoughts? I think we've planted some mustard seeds. I hope.
I really appreciate everyone staying on this long too. We went way over 3 o'clock. I mean, we didn't say exactly how long it was going to, we went way past the hour. We didn't say how long it was going to be, but I'm happy to see all your faces here and see the names and hear the voices of those who are all giving this attention, your attention and bringing your expertise and your knowledge to, and your experience, advocating and liberating all the time.
I have a question, if it's okay.
Great.
The one of the families that I work with, the one that has actually brought up race of their own volition and has asked me to speak to their child and given me that permission is a Black family. And the child is young, he's 7 years old. So for either Anastasia or Deb, do you have any recommendations on a book that would be helpful or geared towards a child of color? Kind of in the same vein as the book that you wrote, Anastasia?
There's so many, there's so many beautiful books about Blackness. I mean, but also just childhood that isn't defined by racial struggle, but what am I trying to say? What is the need that was expressed? I can't tell if you're asking for books about Black history, although I don't, you know, Black history is history.
Yeah.
What?
Yeah. More specifically about like these parents expressed to me that at first they didn't want their child to know about what was happening when George Floyd was murdered. And then it was introduced in school, and the school did a decent job of talking about it, according to the parents. But I would like to help this child with any feelings around like being a Black boy in a world where Black people are murdered. I don't know if I'm making sense.
Support in the classroom?
I'm sorry?
Do they want your classroom to be?
I'm a therapist. I'm sorry.
Right. So it's one-on-one. I think that you have to do a lot of research in the use of bibliotherapy, that there's so many books that you have to read to see if they fit. You can't just assume that they have a certain title. Like I saw a book advertised yesterday called Something Happened in Our Town. And it's about a shooting, and it's got a white kid and a Black kid on the cover. And I went to Amazon, but they wouldn't let you open it up. I couldn't look at it.
Right.
And I would never say buy something. And the only thing, there was some twist about the cops in it. It is about a shooting, and there was just a little too much let's tie it up with a bow of cops are good people that just stuck in my craw in what I read about the book, but I would want to look deeply at it. But there are wonderful Black bookstores that we should be giving business to, that if you call them, and I'm sorry, I saw it on Facebook, I can't, but you can Google Black-owned bookstores and call them up, and they will give you the books. They will tell you, here's what's great.
And Kelly Ramsey put one in, and I put one in the chat for you.
Thank you so much.
Go ahead, Debbie. I'm sorry, Deborah.
No, that's great. That's great. No, my thought was finished.
I wanted to also say the website that I put in the chat, Teaching for Change, that's a good website also. That was actually put together by teachers, different resources to have these conversations with children.
Oh, great.
Thank you so much.
People have been doing it and doing it well for years, but there is no data yet on what the best way to do it is for adults or for kids. And I'm still reading, these articles are so long, in the New York Sunday Times magazine section from last week, an article about Robin DiAngelo's White Fragility, looking at, can you really make a difference? Can you teach this stuff? And what I say is that you can't teach it in a half-a-day workshop, that the learning has to be ongoing, and that there has to be ongoing conversation. It's not like I did the 2-day workshop on undoing racism, and it just got me started. The work is, like Anna says, it's inside. Anyway.
Yeah. No, and it's it's the combination of, it's the personal, deeply personal work, along with the willingness to take those risks in public, in relationship, in moments where we have a chance to have, knowing what my power is as a white person is not just so that I can be like, oh, that sucks, that's so unfair that I have all this. It's not about, it's like, if I know what my power is, then I can also be really strategic about, like, okay, so where can I Where can I counter anti-Blackness here? Where can I draw the this group of white people closer into this and, like, you know, open this up to them here so that we make a different choice? And so what's our opportunities in every day? We start looking for those. So to have outer impact while we do the inner work.
And how to have courageous conversations, literally. And there's a book about that. And I think about when I started feeling like I was proselytizing and pushing my friend away, I thought, okay, it's more about doing right than being right. I get into a place where I want to be so right. And I have to step back from that.
And it would have, people have boundaries. I mean, you respected your friend's boundaries.
Yeah.
So we have some resources being shared here. Ijuma Jordan, ECE consultant on Facebook. So grab these, everybody. I put here
childhood education, ECE.
Early childhood, I guess so. I don't know. Zin Education Project is a website. They'll drop knowledge in your inbox every day, Instagram and email. I learned so much from Howard Zinn, Young People's History of the United States, and just people's history. Yeah, it blows it's just, it's real history. Let me see what else. I'm gonna put in here.
Therapy webinar.
What's that?
Last weekend there was a webinar about bibliotherapy. It's on YouTube. Courtney Fletcher and Susan Bernardo, they had resources on books of various topics.
Okay. Does anybody use Instagram? I recommend following Adrienne Marie Brown. I'm putting her name in the comments. She's also, wonderful with the intersections, but has a lot of nourishment and guidance for white people, for men. She's pro-sex, pro-fat, positive, all the wonderful things in this wonderful person. And new strategies, emerging strategies for collective action. Instead of always being at war, instead of always being resisting, what are we shaping? How are we evolving? Which leads us to Octavia Butler in the closing.
Anastasia, did you want to do it or did you want me to do it?
I think I do. I think I want to do it. I'm a little bit in love with Octavia Butler, and
go for it.
Okay, let me just leave these. We would like to. Okay. And all these people have podcasts and videos. I put them in there. Rasma Menachem, Reverend Angel, Adrienne Marie Brown, Ruby Sales. It keeps correcting, it keeps auto-correcting people's names. It's really irritating. Okay. Let me see. Before I finish, how's everybody? Anybody have a need that we haven't made room for, or have something that you want to speak to, or I'm waiting to see. Yeah. Okay. I'm not seeing the resources you put up. It didn't let me put the links. It wouldn't let me put all the. So I just put the words.
I had Google.
I'm going to try one more time, see if it'll let me. Let's see.
And are there any voices that we didn't make room for today, or who needed more room?
Yeah. Okay, I'm not able to give you what I prepared there. But Manisha, who you signed through Modulo, Modulo, we can get you the resources through there probably. But it's all the same things that we mentioned. Okay, so what I wanted to read is a poem. So Octavia Butler is, she wrote a book called, she wrote many, many books. She is no longer living. In 1993, she published a book called Parable of the Sower. It is the first of a three-book: Parable of the Sower, Parable of the Talents, Parable of the Trickster. And it's a prescient book. If you read it today, you would probably be just blown away by what she predicted would be happening right now. And there is writing like poems, little poems throughout this book. And one of them just, to me, is so, speaks to how whiteness pervades our minds and gets embedded into culture and the places where we can disrupt that. So I'll share this poem and then I'll also put it into the chat for you. Okay. Beware. All too often we say what we hear others say. We think what we're told that we think. We see what we're permitted to see. Worse, we see what we're told that we see. Repetition and pride are the keys to this. To hear and to see even an obvious lie again and again and again may be to say it almost by reflex, then to defend it because we've said it, and at last to embrace it because we've defended it, and because we cannot admit that we've embraced and defended an obvious lie. Thus, without thought, without intent, we make mere echoes of ourselves, and we say what we hear others say. That's from Parable of the Sower. And I put it in the chat if you want to grab it. Thank you, Deb.
Oh, thank you, Anastasia. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Deb, for asking me to do this together. And I so respect the way that you teach and the way that you model growth and learning. And it's an honor to be with you in that. I've long admired your ability to do this. So it's nice to be teamed up.
And you're my teacher. Oh, thank you. And Manisha, thank you for giving us the platform to do this on. And thank you everybody for on a Sunday afternoon, spending your time doing hard work.
Thank you so much to both of you. And I just wanted to let you know I did post the link to the resources that we shared at the last workshop, and we'll update it with the new resources. I'll just post it again so you can see that.
Okay, thank you.
Great, thank you. And can participants hit in the chat box the file button to download the chat? Or is it just hosts that can do that?
I saved it. You can save the chat.
Great. Thank you, Alicia.
Okay, great.
Alicia, how do you do it? How do you save it?
I know on my computer, you'll see, like I see, it says file, and then you have 3 dots. Then I click the 3 dots and it says save chat.
Do you see it? It's in the, when you've got your chat box open, it's in the bottom right-hand corner. Right next to where you would be typing.
Maybe I have a difference since I'm on the iPad.
I can email it to you, Lucy.
Oh, perfect. Thank you. I'm just taking screenshots, but it would be nice if I can download it. Thank you.
Will everybody get a copy of this recording once you've edited it?
Yeah, we'll send it out to everybody.
Great.
Awesome.
Great.
Thank
Thank you,
you.
Manisha.
Thank you for your contributions to it, all of you, and your faces and your voices.
We really appreciate you. And we hope you have a beautiful and active summer.
Thank you. This was wonderful. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you all. Sorry I didn't come on camera, but I'm having a slow Sunday and I'm not dressed.
Good for you. Good for you. It's a day of rest. It should be for us all.
Right.
Too
May
much
everybody,
camera.
may everybody stay healthy and well.
Thank you. Thank you for everything.
Thank you, Irene.
Thank you.
Bye.
Everyone have a great day. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
Thank you, Kelly and Nicole. Thank you, Lucy.
Bye, Anastasia. Bye. Thank you.
Bye. Irene. Stay in touch if you like. I'm findable.
Lucy, so good to see you, and Irene.
Oh, it's good to see you too, Deb. I'm glad I was able to make it to the end this time.
Me too. Me too. No emergencies.
All right. Thanks. Bye.
Take care. Bye. Bye, Lucy. All right, I'm gonna, oh, we never did the 1, 2, 3 thing, did we, for this?
We did it at the, I think there's enough of a cut.
Okay, all right, so I'm gonna stop this.
You can either kind of cut before I thanked you or just after. It's nice when everybody says goodbye. We can cut Lucy's little tech problem there.
Yeah.
But yeah, I thought it was awesome. It's just perfect. You guys did an amazing job, just like from the beginning to the end.